Today on the Best of Oklahoma Gardening, we are dealing with water in the landscape. We visit a bioretention and rain garden demonstration project in Oklahoma City and a water conservation demonstration garden at the Oklahoma City Zoo. We have information about subsurface drip irrigation, tips on saving water around the house, and an update on our sand cistern project.
Basically, it's like you have water in a straw.
Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance is provided by TLC, Oklahoma's leading garden center, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, Tulsa's source for great gardens, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
Hello, today we're in eastern Oklahoma City at our bioretention and rain garden demonstration project where we're looking at removal of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment from the runoff that runs into the Hog Creek watershed. The Hog Creek watershed drains into Lake Thunderbird, which is a drinking water source for Norman, Del City, and Midwest City. So the quality of the water that comes out of this drainage is of very high importance. Because of that, we got an EPA 319 grant, and we've retrofitted a neighborhood here in Deerfield Estates with some rain gardens and bioretention cells. Rain gardens and bioretention cells are generally considered about the same thing, but a lot of times the difference is a difference of scale. So we're going to start out here with something that I would probably call a rain garden, which is more of a residential scale, and build into something that's a larger scale that would more generally be called a bioretention cell. So here is our most upstream or in the headwaters of this drainage rain garden, which is kind of in a gently sloping drainage here, and we have a number of different plant types. We have some fountain grass, we have knockout roses, some liriope, monkey grass, and finally some crepe myrtles. And we've designed this so that it accepts the water from upstream. It gently ponds it about 4 to 6 inches, and then it overflows. But while it's ponded, it's able to infiltrate into the groundwater. And an important thing to note is that we have hardwood mulch in here. The hardwood mulch is denser. It's not going to float off like the rest of our lighter mulch would that you would typically use in your landscape. So here is the second of our rain gardens. This is actually in the same neighborhood as the first one, a little bit smaller, where we're using some of the same types of plants. We're using our crepe myrtles, our knockout roses, and then this one we have some daylilies in along with our hardwood mulch, and it's finished off with some brick that was left over from when they built their house over here. So we were able to really tie this into the house and also tie it into our other rain garden that is just a little bit further upstream. So now we're at a rain garden about halfway down our drainage way into the neighborhood, and this is a little bit larger bowl. It's a little bit deeper. This is really sandy soil, so we're able to get some more ponding in there, and it can still drain within the 24 hours that we want so that we don't create mosquito habitat. Here once again we have our fountain grass, we have some of these bunch grasses, we have black-eyed Susan, pampas grass, and once again our knockout roses. And you will notice that we have different types of plants at different layers within our bowl. That's because this is going to stay wet for a longer period of time. Those plants are going to have wet feet, and then as you go up the bowl they're going to be drier for longer periods of time. So we got our black-eyed Susan, some of our pampas grass up there that are able to survive with a little bit less water and don't have to worry about having their feet wet for so long. On this one we also have a dry creek bed that comes down here through these trees. This particular homeowner was having some erosion issues, so we put some large rock in there. And then as the water comes down, then it comes and it fills up into this bowl. One thing that we do need to keep an eye on, and one thing that we actually had to work with this year, is that there may be sediment sources that arise upstream of your rain garden that you weren't aware of or weren't existing when you put your rain garden in. So this happened at this neighborhood where the neighbor put their garden in this year after we had constructed it last year. So we'll go up here and we'll look at some of the things that we did to kind of keep that sediment out of our rain garden. So up here at the upstream end of our dry creek bed where we had some sediment issues coming in, especially this spring when we had really high flows and all the rainfall, we used a couple different BMPs to kind of keep our sediment out, and basically we're trying to slow it down, filter it out, and give it a chance to settle. So the two things that we did, we used this is a wattle. It's basically something that's used for a construction site, and it slows the water down, ponds it up, and gives that sediment a chance to settle out. And then along with that, we brought some sod in here because before it was just some of the natural grasses here in his backyard. So this sod really protects that soil. Vegetation can be your best defense against erosion. So with those two things working together, we were really able to slow down the sediment, to stop it. It might require a little bit of clean out, but hopefully next year we won't get record-breaking rains again and we won't have to have that issue, but that's something that you need to keep an eye on. So now we're at the bottom of the drainage in a large-scale bioretention cell that is collecting much of the water from the entire neighborhood, the entire drainage that's coming down to this point. This is about an 8,000 square foot bioretention cell that is located just outside of the 100-year floodplain, and it has about 6 inches of sand media underneath it with a underdrain system. We want to have this drain, but because it is lower down in the watershed, the water table is a little bit higher, so we have an underdrain system in there so that once again we can drain this in 24 to 48 hours. In this one, we kind of designed this to be built like an inverted golf green because this particular homeowner likes to shoot his golf balls down into this area, and we kind of got creative and decided that we would try to make this look like an inverted golf green. So we have Tiff Bermuda grass in the bottom of our bioretention cell that's built into our sand. The Tiff is going really well. It's withstanding some of the ponding that we have going on, even in the really higher rains that we had this spring when there was even flooding in this area that caused the water to be on there for longer than a week. It still stood up very, very well. In addition to this, we have our cypress plants. We have a sand trap over here on the side, and then we have some cottonless cottonwoods that we put up kind of just to frame our entire system. But once again, this is about 8,000 square feet, so this can handle a good chunk of the water that's coming off of our whole neighborhood. It's kind of our last bioretention cell in there. So we have smaller scale ones at our upper part of it, middle scale ones as we go farther down, and then down here at the end to intercept everything that's coming off of our neighborhood, we have a larger scale bioretention cell that's filtering out a lot of our pollutants. So if you're interested in learning more about bioretention cells and rain gardens, check out our website at lid.okstate.edu and click on the bioretention cell link.
Today we're at the Oklahoma City Zoo and Botanical Garden, and I'm here with Horticulture Supervisor Lance Swearingen, and we've just worked with the City of Oklahoma City, the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service, and the Oklahoma City Zoo to put in a brand new water conservation demonstration area, and it fits right in with what the zoo is doing already with not only animal conservation but also plant conservation. So Lance, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on here in the garden?
Welcome to the zoo, Dr. Moss.
Thank you.
The mission at the zoo is animal, plant, and natural resource conservation. So the cornerstone of our botanical garden natural resource efforts are this water conservation garden. So here I want to show you a little bit about some perennials that we have that are drought tolerant and give you that nice color. This is Salvia gregii, which is Furman's red autumn sage. This is a drought tolerant semi-evergreen perennial that blooms all summer long and is a really great addition to give you the aesthetic appeal that we want in a drought tolerant garden. Also here we have some yarrow, Achillea. This is moonshine cultivar, and then we also have a red velvet cultivar right here. But this is a herbaceous perennial. This blooms all summer long and is drought tolerant once established. So some really nice selections so you can get that color out of your drought tolerant garden.
So lots of sunlight coming in here. Is that important for these plants, Lance?
It is. They require full sun, but they can also require a little bit of shade too. But to get that nice bloom on them, you want to give them as much sun as you can.
All right, great. What else do you have through here?
We have Russian sage, which is one of my personal favorites. It's Perovskia atriplycofolia, and it has a nice scent to the foliage, so that adds some fragrance as well as a long bloom time. This will bloom all summer, and it is also a perennial, so it'll come back, and it's a nice water-wise plant to choose for your garden.
So talking about water-wise, you've called this the xeriscape garden, or the responsible water use garden, or water conservation garden, and there's lots of signs through here for education for your patrons that might walk through. And I see different areas of mulch and proper plant selection and everything. So Lance, what about this this rock area here? Is this natural? Is there something you put in?
These are natural rocks that are natural to the zoo when it was built. And this is what we consider our xeriscape garden, or our drought tolerant garden. And so this is going to be a really nice addition to the botanical garden. Guests can come in and view our signage and choose some really nice drought tolerant plants and get some really great ideas about how they can xeriscape their garden, save water, and also still beautify the landscape and have a lot of nice bloomers.
And you have some other beautiful landscaped areas, of course, all across the zoo, but tell me a little bit about this new hospital.
We have some new plantings there that I'd like to share with you, some drought-tolerant specimens that I think the viewers would really like to see.
Okay. So Lance, here we are at the hospital area. Lots of cool things for the patrons to see inside, but what about outside here? What about the plants? What do we have here?
Well, these are some of our drought-tolerant gardens that we put in here at the veterinary hospital. This is color guard yucca, Yucca filamentosa. And this kind of yucca really brings a lot of that color to the garden that you don't see in a lot of yuccas. And then here at the back we have red yucca, which is Hesperalo parviflora. And that's a really nice tall flower spike that gives you some height in the garden. And these are drought tolerant selections that we chose to be more conservative in our water usage.
And I like the use of the mulch here, a nice 3-inch layer of mulch to hold the water in as well.
Yeah, and that cuts down on weeds also.
And then over here, a very nice area. What do we have here?
These are Shasta daisies. They're a drought tolerant once established, and this is Leucanthemum superbum, and this cultivar is Becky. And so this is a really nice bloomer, and deadheading these, removing the spent blooms will keep them blooming nicely all year. And then over here we have some Gaillardia. This cultivar is Arizona Sun. And also removing the spent flower heads on these will keep them blooming nicely through the summer. And these are drought tolerant once they're established.
Okay, appreciate it, Lance.
No problem.
Well, we're standing here on a beautiful turfgrass area. It's very green, very beautiful right now. This is a simulated tee box here at the Turfgrass Research Center. And this is irrigated a little bit different. Actually, it's got two systems on it. It's got a traditional above ground sprinkler irrigation system, but it also has a below ground subsurface drip irrigation system. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and Dr. Lou Anella is here to tell us about the components, the advantages and disadvantages of a system. So what do we can't see anything here. What do we got?
Well, we have polyethylene tubes in the ground, probably about 6 inches below the turf, and every 12 or 18 inches they have an emitter in there that allows the water to drip out. And that emitter is an amazing piece of engineering. It has a check valve in there so that the water doesn't run out at the low end. They're supposed to be self-cleaning. They're supposed to be pressure compensating, so the same amount of water comes out over the whole area. They're really quite amazing. And so every 12 inches, 18 inches, 24 inches, you can buy them of different lengths. There's a small hole in the polyethylene, and it lets the water come out at a very nice slow rate.
So you mentioned different spacing, 12 or maybe 18 inches. What for the soil, what does it matter if it's 12 or 18 inches? How does that affect it?
Well, the soil actually determines what spacing you'd use. So if you think about a sandy soil, that water is going to move fairly quickly and fairly straight down. So you would need a pipe with the spacings shorter. But in a clay soil, that water is actually going to spread out, and so you can get away with having the emitters 2 feet away. Actually, it would be better to have them 2 feet away so that you don't put too much water down too quickly.
So in a system like this, the water is being dripped underground instead of sprayed above the ground. What are some, just for water conservation or water efficiency, what are some advantages there?
Well, the advantage is you're putting the water exactly where you want it. You know, you don't necessarily want water up on the trees, up on the leaves. That can cause disease. So you're putting the water exactly where you want it. And almost every spray irrigation system you've ever seen has the pressure too high. And so when you get that misting, that's a waste of water. That water can evaporate and just disappear. So here, all the water is going exactly to the roots, right to the roots. Very little waste. Now you can overwater even with a drip system. So you can get runoff, you can overwater, but typically it is much more efficient.
And then what about the drip rate, or what does the emitter emit? Is it a lot of water, a little water? How does that work?
Again, there's a range. You can buy different products, but usually it's 0.4 gallons per hour, not minute, but per hour,
Right.
or 0.6 or 0.9. So gallons per hour. So it's a very, very slow rate.
And then if you were to compare that to, there's two systems here, so there's the above ground system. How much water would that be putting out, would you say?
So the spray irrigation system will be putting out 1 to 2 gallons per minute, not per hour.
Wow. So a big difference in the amount of water that's going out, and you're putting it at the roots versus above the ground. Now, what about disadvantages? Why isn't everybody doing this? You know, in Oklahoma, there's not a lot of these systems. Why not?
Well, it really isn't efficient if you're going to do a really large area. So for a small area like this, a tee box, it really works quite well. But if you're going to try to do a soccer field, you know, that's going to be a lot of pipe under the ground, and that's going to cost a lot of money. So you've got to trench that in, or get it down under the surface, so that's going to be very labor intensive. In this situation here, we're actually using non-potable water. So the water is not very clean. And those little holes that are in the polyethylene pipe can clog very easily. So we always have a filter, always have a filter on a drip system. Well, here, that filter is getting clogged within 5 minutes of us turning the water on. So in this situation, it's actually not working very well at all because we don't have a nice, clean water source. So the filter's getting clogged, and you'd have to be cleaning it all the time. So even at home though, like once a year, you've got to clean that filter because it will get deposits on it and it will affect the efficiency. Another reason that makes drip a little bit more difficult to use is people aren't familiar with it. And also, it's all under the ground. Is it working? I don't know. Is it working? So, you've got to, there are some things you can do to know whether or not it's working. There's actually these little flags you can buy that will pop up when your system is working. And you can also measure the pressure on the line. So when you put the system in, you measure the pressure, and then as the system, ages, you keep measuring that pressure. And if the pressure goes down, then you might have a leak somewhere. If pressure goes up, you've probably got clogging somewhere. So there are things you can do to know whether or not the system is working, but it is a challenge.
So another thing that's often talked about is, people will ask, well, what about if I need to apply a fertilizer or a pesticide, and the label says, well, I need to wash that in, or for a fertilizer, I need to water that in lightly. What do I do there with a subsurface drip system?
I don't know. I don't know, honestly, whether or not if you watered it heavily enough, whether or not it would bring the fertilizers down, not by washing it in, but sort of dissolving it and letting it flow down with the water profile. I really don't know. I don't know if research has been done on that or not. But for fertilizer like nitrogen, I'm sure that would happen. But whether or not pre-emergent, for example, is going to get dissolved well enough and brought down into the profile of that, I'm really not sure.
So with a system like this, there seems to be a lot of advantages, a few disadvantages as well. What do you think is the key driver for something like this? What would be the top important reason why I'd want to do something or try this out?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because in many communities, especially in California and maybe in Texas as well, it's code. If you have a narrow strip between like a sidewalk and a street where you don't have a wide area, you have to use drip by code. So there's a real good reason to use it. And then if you just want to try to conserve water, I like to use drip because it's very versatile. So if I want to just change the shape of the bed, I can do it. The polyethylene pipe can just bend. You know, if this had all sprinkler irrigation and I wanted to change the shape of the bed, that would be a pretty big job to redo the PVC pipe and move things around. But with drip, with polyethylene, it's extremely flexible. It's extremely easy to move it around and make different shapes.
So several things to consider for subsurface drip here in Oklahoma. Thank you very much for your insights, Dr. Anella.
My pleasure.
Today we're here at the Rainwater sound cistern here in the studio gardens, and we're here to kind of see how it's been doing since it was built on the show back in 2012. If you remember, we started this out by excavating a hole and putting a liner down at the bottom. The bottom part of that liner was filled with some tubing and some sand that would serve as our cistern that would hold the water that comes off of the roof and down into the Rainwater sand cistern. Above that, we have some topsoil so that our vegetation will grow, and we had some sand columns to allow the water to go down into the system. Well, we've been utilizing this for a few years now, and what we found is that it holds water very well. As long as you keep using it, it's going to continue to be useful and to function. What we have found, however, is that although we designed it for 1,000 gallons, the most we've been able to get out of it at one time is about 400 gallons. That's because the capillary forces that occur down in that sand. Basically, just like you have water in a straw that has capillary attraction to it, the water that's down there in those sand particles wants to stay in the sand particles. So we could pump it at a very low rate, like what we would use for drip irrigation, and get about 400 gallons out of it. Let it sit for a day, and we could come back and get 200 or 300 gallons more out of it, and so on and so forth. But if we wanted to get all of that out of there at one time, we wouldn't be able to do that. So what we want to recommend now is that if you need to have something that you can get 1,000 gallons out of at one time, you need to oversize it to account for some of those forces that are holding that water within that sand. So if you're thinking about putting in a rainwater sand cistern, you might want to take some of those things into account. And if you'd like to build one for yourself, we have a YouTube playlist available online where you can learn how to put these together.
So spring is coming soon, and it's time to start thinking about our irrigation systems and how to save water outdoors. And so one of the things we can do is really think about fixing leaks around the house. And EPA even sponsors a Fix a Leak Week for homeowners. And they have a nice website called WaterSense that tells you how you can save water around your home. And here today we have a guest with us, Madeleine Wiens from the City of Oklahoma City Office of Sustainability. And she's got some great tips for us about how to save water around the home. So what can you tell us, Madeleine?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, EPA WaterSense Month takes place for the entire month of March, and then throughout April they also try to promote ways that we can avoid water waste outdoors and within our homes and with some of the fixtures in them. And they've found that a leak that is as small as just 1/32 of an inch in diameter, which is just about as thick as a dime, can actually lose you as much as 6,300 gallons of water a month. So checking for those in your irrigation system is great. Also, if you find that your hose has a leak at the spigot, you can easily replace your nylon washer and just try to tighten it as much as possible.
So that's great. It's amazing how much water can be lost just by a tiny leak like that. So again, that's probably why they sponsor Fix a Leak Week or or WaterSense Month. So you're with the City of Oklahoma City. Does the city itself sponsor anything like this as well?
Yes, absolutely. The City Water Utilities Department, as a part of our Water Utilities Trust, has a campaign called Squeeze Every Drop. You can go to their Twitter at SqueezeEveryDrop or SqueezeEveryDrop.com. And you'll get some simple tips for how to avoid watering during some of the times of the day where a lot of your water is going to evaporate. And you can also see some tips on how to determine whether or not you have a leak in your toilet. For example, you can put a food coloring drop in the tank of your toilet. And if that shows up in the bowl, that means that you've probably got a leak in that toilet. We also internally try to promote city departments to save water within city facilities. And so we actually sponsored all of our fire stations and police stations to trade out the aerators on their faucets to higher pressure aerators that only flow about 1/2 gallon per minute.
Well, that's great. I mean, just looking around Oklahoma City and around the state, you can see some of those water reservoir levels are shrinking. So saving water around the home, very important. What else should the viewers know? Maybe if they're not from Oklahoma City, maybe they're from other parts of the state or from the region, what can they do?
Yeah, actually the Oklahoma Water Resources Board, as a part of their comprehensive water plan, has created kind of a landing page on their Oklahoma Water Resources Board website where you can access resources like we just mentioned through the EPA and other state agencies throughout the country who have tried to promote these kinds of practices at home.
Well, thank you, Madeleine. Great tips for the homeowner, how to save water around the home. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Moss.
Next week on the Best of Oklahoma Gardening, we are taking a break from winter with an episode filled with beautiful gardens from the past season. We visit some historical gardens on the OSU Stillwater campus. We have a couple of the gardens featured on the Oklahoma Horticultural Society's 2015 Garden Tour for Connoisseurs. And then Barbara Brown has a light recipe to help us with our healthful resolutions. So join us in for more of the best TV you'll grow to love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society.